Greetings and welcome to ETV English special program. Presenting you with this edition, I am Kirana Baina. Thank you for joining us and do stay with the remainder of the program. Many of you may be well aware of what took place in Pretoria, South Africa a couple of days ago. The Ethiopian government and the TPLF have signed a peace agreement. So now the issue of building trust after a period of conflict to ensure sustainable peace needs to be addressed. That is what we will look at in today's special program. For the discussion today, I am joined by a social anthropologist who was born and raised here in Ethiopia. And she's a social anthropologist, like I said earlier, who has worked in different NGOs in the humanitarian sector, as well as provided support in different capacities for the Ethiopian Risk Management Program. Thank you very much, Dr. Angela Raven Roberts.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Very happy to be here, and this is a very important time. By coincidence, I happen to be here, and thank you for your invitation.
Now, before we dive into today's major topic, what I want to ask you first is the issue of resolving conflicts in Ethiopia. And actually, on a smaller scale, I'm well aware that it involves elders, for instance, or well-respected parts of society to resolve conflicts. But speaking about a larger scale of conflict and resolving that, for instance, like we've seen for the past 2 years of Ethiopia, what can you say about the general culture of Ethiopia in terms of resolving conflicts on a large scale?
My perspective is from someone who's been working in globally crisis situations and the aftermath, especially of conflict and war. And I think the very important thing, as you say, grounding it in the local context, and as you say, in the Ethiopian context. I mean, I know there are many experts here within Ethiopia at the various universities who have studied and know local conflict resolution mechanisms. But it is very important to combine, especially when you want to build trust, because trust works in terms of a combination of truth and transformation, because you want everyone to examine everything, take it apart layer by layer, bawiyit and gumgama in the old days, and then collectively come to a resolution towards the transformation. So there needs to be a kind of a vision of what the future is. And in the Ethiopian context, my understanding of the old and the traditional method, we'll start there with the traditional methods. Even though it was Shimagales in the Amhara region, the Afar region, the southern Konso, Omo, I mean, there are many, many traditional systems, and they are built on the issue of discussion, everybody contributing, you know, a perspective, and then taking it apart and you know, coming together in terms of what needs to be changed, what happened in the past, and building that together. And I think this is a process that can happen while at the top level there are political, you know, the macro is also being discussed. And I'd like to say that I recognize it's been a very painful period for everybody, everywhere, as part of an international pain that all of us around the world have been facing: COVID, pandemics, inflation. So you know, my heart goes out to everyone who is struggling with this pain and how to transform it. So that's one beginning of this issue, but we can talk some more.
Yeah, we will. And to start on that, actually, you know, towards the peace deal, there have been different ups and downs for the Ethiopian people in general. So what I want to ask you now is, how would you think the overall process, you know, that has come towards the peace deal impacted Ethiopian societies, including those in Tigray, you might add, just everybody affected by the conflict? Like you said, it's even felt at an international level, but bringing it to our Ethiopian society, how do you think the process has impacted us?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been outside since 2018. That was the last time I was here. And so both with the shock of COVID that we all felt and then started here. I mean, my understanding and what I know from my friends and what I've read, it is, I think, the biggest rupture that has happened. Very, very deep social rupture, and what in peace building, you know, we talk about social suffering that has to be overcome towards social healing, that has to lead to social cohesion. And I think all over Ethiopia, I mean, people have been suffering. Chinkat, I mean, it's a combination of the conflict, the drought, the inflation, the COVID, and it builds and interlocks together, and then the polarization that has happened, that has even deeply wounded, I feel, people's faiths, people's ideologies, to a point that, in my own experience, I've never seen this happen here, and it was deeply, I felt the pain of all of Ethiopia, and I think how that is healed is something we all have to work with. And I think politically the process has to be nurtured. I mean, all discussions need to be nurtured like a little baby. You know, you have to give them space to talk, to discuss. And meanwhile, at the ground level, Hizb, I mean, citizen to citizen, we need to face things. I think it was the great American author James Baldwin who I think he said something like, not everything that is faced can be changed, but you cannot change anything until it is faced. And I think we are at a moment when everybody has to face, not just in Ethiopia, but in the world, we have to face those issues and build an environment to really talk about them in peace, and to get over the pain, the anger, the frustration, and say, you know, we need to build from the bottom.
Yeah, speaking of building from the bottom, I mean, let's bring it to the present condition that we're in after the 2 years of conflict. Finally, a peace agreement has been reached, which is, you know, good news for all. However, during that time, during the time of the conflict, the perception of the people who are impacted by the conflict, it has changed drastically. And people, some people from that area, the conflict-afflicted areas, might look at this peace agreement as the people who hurt them or hurt their loved ones going free or unscathed. So that kind of perception is embedded in their mindset. And with that, like, how can we, you know, move past it and build the trust to move past the conflict?
No, this is a very good question, and it also affects, you know, everywhere else. For example, where I come from, in our issues with Britain and the huge Northern Ireland situation, it was the same kind of thing. You have to get to a point where, number one, revenge. I mean, people are going to be angry, painful, and how you get beyond that, and you need an enabling environment where people not only trust each other, but they can also trust the institutions. And so that's why, at the same time as you're communicating or you're dialoguing, other institutions around you need to solidify. So, for example, you really need to have just basic services working. So people, for example, can trust institutions, that they can have access to health care, to food. All the things that keep you alive have to be accelerated and put there, so then people don't have to worry about that. So then when they start discussing with each other, and they need support from traditional leaders, faith leaders, you know, the religion, elders, shamagiles, and especially, for example, women and youth can also, you know, talk to each other and be monitoring, you know, what's going on, and creating that environment where truth can come out, but also be dealt with, and at the same time people feel because after the settlement, there's issue of recovery, restitution, you know, social justice. You know, are we going to trust the legal framework so that, you know, we can get justice to what happened? All of these things have to grow parallel.
Yeah, well, to grow them parallelly, actually, for society, it can take it might take some time, but is there something that we can do to accelerate the process of, you know, finding trust in each other at the societal level? Might not particularly be governments or parties of the conflict, but as a society, how can that trust be accelerated?
Well, first of all, I think, I mean, everybody has to dig deep into their own traditional systems. I mean, your own faith, for example, and also if everything that people are doing, whether it's a development project, a humanitarian project, can be not just conflict sensitive, but I would say harmony sensitive. I mean, what are we doing, whether it's a vaccination program or rebuilding a school? Is there a way we can do it that emphasizes our collaboration, our working towards a future transformation? How does you know, my faith help in Gningyunet? How you know, when we talk to each other, our vision of ourselves as a person, as a community, as a country, and as a planet, because at the end of the day, we're not only saving ourselves, we also, this is all happening in the context of climate change and huge threat that the species is going to be eroded. And I think drawing deep on traditional systems and combining them with, you know, other systems from the top, the bottom to come together is going to be very important.
Okay, so like you said earlier, you're familiar with post-conflict situations, and in this process of Ethiopia moving past the conflicts, Martin Plaut, a journalist who's considered an expert on the Horn of Africa, had said something about the previous towns that the then TPLF-run government had claimed as part of Tigray being returned to the Tigray region, but it has now come under the control of the Ethiopian government. Now, speaking of resolving the conflict and moving on, does it include such steps of the government-controlled areas being returned to their previously claimed areas or regions?
I'm not sure the thing, what he said that you're referring to. I haven't been, I'm afraid, this weekend since the agreement, I haven't been following internet or anything. I've been outside, so I haven't read the news analysis.
Yeah, actually, but, on Al Jazeera Inside Story, he said it. Okay. There were two other panelists, three himself included, and that's the platform he said that on.
I'll look at it. I haven't looked at it, but I mean, that's the kind of, again, that's the kind of thing I would say. The James Baldwin, not every, you know, politically, those are the issues that need to be faced. And the way that they're going to be faced is going to be the delicate situation. That those are some of the questions that need to be looked at very carefully, and then they all need to agree on how they're going to address them, and if they're historical, you know, local, because it's all to do with history. It's all to do with livelihoods. You know, who lives there. You know, how do they come to live there? What are they doing? You know, how does our big micro decisions impact on people's livelihood systems? And you know, if it's a cross-border issue. So these are all the kinds of things that have to be put on the table. But again, they have to be nurtured. You know, you have to sort of take the noise away so that people can just sit down and speak truthfully and you know, masobu sifatan dagana. You have to put it back together again with the right issues. I wish them luck anyway.
All right, so moving on to how the conflict was resolved, it kind of has this essence of African solutions to African problems, which is what Africa as a continent is striving towards. So with this peace deal now, how would you say it's going to impact the future culture of the overall African continent towards resolving such conflicts or such issues?
It was very good to see the AU being, you know, emboldening itself to fully embrace and take this. And I think this hopefully puts a lot of hope to solve a lot of the other, you know, very unfortunate problematic issues that happen in other countries. And I think it's not for nothing that, I mean, Pretoria, South Africa itself is a great example of the way in which, you know, things were arrived at in resolution after coming out of an intense period of, you know, a terrible apartheid movement, which could have really pulled, you know, people apart and been very hateful, and the great leadership of Nelson Mandela, and the concept of using sort of traditional African philosophy of Ubuntu. I don't know, in Oromia it might be Nwama, no, so I mean, Sabanet, I mean, the notion of humanity and building solidarity and cohesion, you know, through a sense of forgiveness, but also underlying, again, understanding, getting through the pain, letting everybody talk, and building this up. And of course, Africa, there are great examples in where, for example, women's organizations in Liberia, Sierra Leone, came together to support peace processes and act actually as monitoring, you know, to oversee and be included and say, you know, while you guys are talking, you know, we want you to remember this, to factor in that, you know, there needs to be justice, there needs to be reparation. And I think all of these examples can be drawn because they are from the continent itself by traditional, and there's also traditional mechanisms that have been used in the past. For example, way back in the 90s in Mozambique, I remember child soldiers who had been accused of doing terrible things. They used a traditional ritual whereby the young boys, you know, went into a river, they shaved their head, they came out, they were given new names, you know, to start life anew, so that the past, the issue of what they had done, rather than be discussed as revenge, you know, could say, okay, we historically, culturally, we have to leave this because we won't live in the future. So there are lots of things to draw on at community level where each of us face what has happened and try and get through the pain. Otherwise, we're all gone. I mean, there's...
All right, so off the bat now, we've talked about the African continent, but one thing that's for sure is the international community. I'm going to go back again. You said it was felt at the international level. So now, talking about moving past this period and building the trust, what do you think the international community can do to foster that process?
Yes, I think the greatest thing the international community can do for here or anywhere is A, to nurture the process, and B, to support you know, all the other things that are going on. I mean, right now, especially here, the drought, the immense need for assistance throughout the whole country needs to be buttressed, because, you know, people are in pain from you know, the drought and the displacement. So one thing is that needs to be stabilized. That needs accelerated support, and then support to the system, the institutions. For example, like the justice system, so that there is a strong system. So when the time comes for you know, what they call social justice, reparation, restitution, the system itself is strong enough to be able to cope with all of this. And so I think my plea would be to support systems, to support everything that they've already invested in, you know, the education system, the health system, everything that has been supported in the past needs to be strengthened so that this peace process doesn't interfere with it, but also B, is not interfered by it, because people can't eat peace settlements. I mean, they need real food. And so creating and supporting that enabling environment is very, very strong, I feel. And, you know, support, that's my bottom line.
We're talking about building trust and moving past conflict, and surely it might not be as easy as ABC. So one major thing that I want to know now is, what's a possible threat to the process of building trust after a period of conflict?
Well, I think noise. Unfortunately, we're in a globe where everybody is now an international politician, and everything, and I think the trust has to be built on transparency and truth, and I think the processes to get at that need to be put in place, and I think the pressure that comes from everywhere, whether it's social media, governments, diasporas, local elites, anyone, you know, please just step back a little and let's tone it down. Let's just let it happen, because we can't afford anywhere for things to mess it up. And I think people, I would hope, and I'm speaking as a personal, that whether it's here or in Great Britain, where we have God knows how many chaos is going on, that people come to their senses and say, give peace a chance, you know, and let's support it. There can never be there's never, I mean, conflicts are never good. and peace is never bad. So you really have to try and nurture it like a baby, and good luck. My heart is with you.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Angela, not only for your message, but for your time today and for your insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Amasagdinadlo.
All right. With that, today's special program comes to an end. I've held a discussion with Dr. Angela Raven Roberts about the trust-building process that's going to come after the peace agreement for Ethiopia. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye for now.